Imagine a world where the iPhone never launched in 2007. It's kind of crazy to think, especially with how folding phones are becoming mainstream now. Well, in 2015, there was a phone which tried to explore that future that never happened, and I kind of wish they would go back to that again. This is the Lenovo A588T. It's an Android flip phone that was launched in 2015 and it has one of three user modes. The first is as a flip phone that you'd have seen in the 2000s. The second is your more traditional smartphone with a touchscreen. And the third is somewhere in the middle as this sort of flip phone touchscreen hybrid. This phone is somewhat of an enigma. My go-to website for researching phone specs is GSM Arena, and even they have nothing on this device. Digging deeper, the earliest mentions I can find of this phone are from 2015, and judging by the specs, this felt like a niche product or a proof of concept rather than something that was meant to be sold in mass. And even at the time, this phone didn't seem like it was aiming to take down the giants of its era, but instead to provide a unique user experience. This phone beautifully marries the concept of a classic clamshell flip phone with a T9 keypad with a touchscreen interface running Android. And you know, that's cool, but Lenovo took it one step further because they let you flip the whole thing around, turning this into a really chunky but otherwise modern smartphone. There's only a single 5-megapixel camera on this phone, but because of how this layout works, it acts as both your main camera and your selfie camera. The touchscreen is a 4-inch screen, which even back in 2015 was considered small. But for this form factor, I think it works in a sort of retro way. But unfortunately, it is a TFT panel, so viewing angles aren't that great. And in this, you get some not so standard hardware as well, such as a removable battery, micro SD support, and a headphone jack. I think trying to review this phone in 2022 is kind of pointless. It was clearly a proof of concept back then, and the fact that no one, not even Lenovo, has made a follow-up to this form factor kind of means they knew it wasn't going to take off. But I kind of like it, and I kind of see a potential for this to be revived in the future. I like how versatile the design is. It's like it's trying to cater to a few age groups at the same time. For those traditional users, you have the classic T9 keyboard where you could just type away without even looking at the screen, just with muscle memory alone. Then for newer users who grew up with smartphones, you have this smartphone layout where all you need is just that single touchscreen. And then somewhere in the middle, for those of us who grew up before the smartphone and during the smartphone era, you have this marriage of both the smartphone era and the touchpad era, where you could just seamlessly switch from one or the other. Strangely enough, I do see a place in the world for this phone, and that's for users who just couldn't adapt to smartphones. As much as all these newer phones are designed to be easy to use, there are just some users who truly cannot grasp them in the slightest. Users like my grandfather. He still rocks an old Nokia dumb phone because for his use case, that's all he really needs. And I'm sure many of us are in a similar situation, having older family members who just prefer dumb phones rather than smartphones. And that's completely fine. But that leaves a problem for us here in smartphone land because it kind of creates this gap between our generations. In the age where everyone's on WhatsApp sending instant texts and messages to their loved ones, we can't exactly keep grandma and grandpa in the loop when their dumb phones can only handle SMS. That's why I think this phone would bridge that gap beautifully. The fact that this runs Android means you could load up all the chat apps you would need to keep in touch with each other, but then the simplicity of the T9 keypad comes in and suddenly grandma and grandpa aren't overwhelmed trying to send you a simple text message. And it's not just the older generation. There's definitely a subset of younger users who are crazy for this dumb phone type of aesthetic, either for nostalgic reasons or just to disconnect from their smartphones. You know, hipsters. Okay, I'm kidding, but there's definitely a subset of users who are looking for this kind of form factor. And that's why Nokia still makes these older phones but modernized. And going for these modern dumb phones is fine in theory if all you're gonna do is stick to SMS and the occasional call here and there. But it all starts to fall apart when you suddenly need to pull up ways to navigate somewhere, send an urgent email on Gmail, stream music on Spotify, watch the occasional YouTube video, or do anything on social media. And suddenly you find yourself running back to your smartphone. With something like this, you could relive those nostalgic days, disconnect from the internet for a while, or just have a simpler device overall if you don't use it much, but have the convenience of a modern smartphone at your fingertips at a moment's notice. Plus, just look at it. I know I keep going on and on about the design, but when everyone else is using a glass rectangle like this just looks so unique in 2022. Picture a modern version of this. Bump up the screen size and shrink as much of the bezel as possible, modernize the specs and the software, and for good measure, add a front-facing display, and this could be a really fun reboot for this age. The price also plays a huge role in this phone's appeal. I picked this up for less than 200 ringgit on Shopee about 2 years ago. But back when it was new in 2015, this cost around 560 ringgit. If they were to reboot this in the modern era, as long as they keep the price tag down to less than 1000 ringgit, I could see this definitely selling like hotcakes. I mean, just think about it. There are Redmi smartphones out there that cost 860 ringgit with multiple cameras, a huge display and a huge battery with an unnecessarily powerful CPU. So if you downsize that and slap on moderate specs onto this, it could definitely work. So all in all, I really enjoyed this little blast of the past from Lenovo. It's unrealistic to hope that anyone reboots this form factor here in 2022, especially with modern foldables becoming more affordable and more mainstream. But one of the things I enjoy about looking at the past is sometimes you find something that could be useful for us here in the future. We have an entire generation of people who just cannot adapt to the modern smartphone era. Or another generation of users who've just grown tired of smartphones in general. And something like this could be exactly what they're looking for. What do you guys think? Do you see the smartphone world revisiting this form factor anytime soon? Or would you personally buy a simpler phone like this in this form factor running Android with modern specs? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Ish, bising lah. Okay, thank you.